in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Toulis.
I must say I love Marie Mott. She is our 11 o'clock host here at Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 95.3 FM HD4 high definition channel 4. I love Marie Mott because she has an earnest love for her city and just radiates care for other people and a strong and powerful personal interest, a personal claim, a vigor that you won't find easily elsewhere. Her name is Marie Mott, and you'll hear her tomorrow at 11 o'clock. And she is one of our broadcast journalists here at the Local Economy, Love Your Neighbor, and Buy Local press platform, Nooga Radio 92.7. And what I wanted to mention to you is something I had in the way of a conversation with Marie this morning after her show. Well, it was just at noon. It ended at noon, and I caught her in the parking lot as I was coming in our wonderfully yellow Hummer, and she was heading off to her next assignment. And one of the things that I mentioned to her is the rationale for Anglo-Saxons and whites, Caucasians, to take alarm at things that are happening among African American or black people in Chattanooga. And I want to mention Joel McDermott's book, The Problem of Slavery in Christian America, which gave me just a remarkable jolt. And I'll say changed my mind in a fundamental way in favor of the kind of personal race reparations project that I'm involved in and was involved in already when I was reading that book. And you want to know what happened to me? Well, it's a history of how the Christian church supported the black slave laws from the very beginning, how Christianity folded away the truth about God's law, touching on questions of servitude and debt and things like that, and rejected the biblical rules for slavery. There are rules for slavery. We have rules for slavery in the Tennessee Code annotated that pertain to the Department of Corrections, which is the slave division of state government. You know, we still have slavery today in various forms, and that's it's called state slavery. In the South, there was chattel slavery, and it began in the late, the mid 1600s. And as this book recounts from Joel McDermott at American Vision, he is the principal at American Vision in the Marietta area near Atlanta. The point is that the Christians rejected the word, right, their authority, God's word, and allowed chattel slavery and allowed interest in revenues from tobacco and cotton to have them not heed all the rules that require redemption, that require manumission of slaves, right? You can't be a slave perpetually. And yet Christians in the South and in the North and everywhere else accepted permanent chattel slavery of blacks and the strength of the argument to keep the black in slavery began just as the war to prevent Southern independence began. And that is the book about races and classes of people from Charles Darwin. And that book that came out in 1858 established the social theory of racism. Modern racism comes from Charles Darwin, and Galton and many other eugenicists fought along with him to change the social sciences, and eventually science itself was changed by the evolutionary theory of Darwin. But first to be affected were social theory, social thinking, the works of mighty men who ran countries and ran colonies, and racism had no antecedent really prior to Darwin. And even though there was slavery before him, slavery was not held. People were not enslaved because of because of the view that they were racially inferior, but because of other economic reasons. Right? They've been bought by Muslim and Jewish slavers. And they're on the market here in the West. So the problem that this book presents for the Christian reader is that he is responsible as a Christian for what's happened today and what we have in Chattanooga and Hamilton County today. And I'm not going to go into details on how McDermott makes his case, but he argues for a personal reparation system, that every Christian give personal reparations. He does not argue for governmental reparations programs, because that would just be another welfare program that wouldn't work and would cost hugely in fraud and administration. But the Christian should have a personal reparation program looking out for people who are aliens and strangers in the land still. And the Bible has a lot to say about the need for God's people to protect and defend aliens and strangers, as well as the poor, and then two other categories, the widow and the orphan. Those have God's special protection, and they always have. And when there's injustice, it's almost always injustice directed and suffered most brutally by these categories of people: aliens and strangers, the poor, and widows and orphans. They're the ones who suffer the most under injustice, whether that injustice is the police state or inflation. They're the ones who get the worst of it. And the point I was making to Marie that I want to, if I can just get to saying it, is this: how do you appeal on a race question to Anglo-Saxons like me, white men and women like me? And I suggested this, and to tell me what you think about it, that if you, my listener, are willing to accept the police state and tyranny on a particular group of people, let's say immigrants from the South, right? Immigrants from south of the border. If you're willing to accept that they be, as non-criminals, non-violent people, non-offenders, to accept the police state on them, well, you are going to receive the fruit of that yourself. In other words, what you want for them will eventually come to you. And it's not that these things will happen. We already have the police state against us white people, in spades. And we invited it because we didn't want immigrants to come. We didn't want Hispanics to come. We didn't. We don't like blacks. We don't trust black people. So we're going to allow slavery against them, even after the war, right? Even after the war to prevent Southern independence, we still have a kind of slavery of black people. And this is McDermott's argument. And so we have to repent for it. And so if we want, and here's the argument for reform in Chattanooga. If we want reform, if we want an end to police abuse, if we want an end to the abuse of Title 55, the transportation statute, to give police authority, total authority of people on the road, then let's start reform to serve the people most hurt by that abuse. And that would be black people and poor people, African Americans, and the impoverished, people who drive or travel in old cars, right? People whose old cars may have a light out in the back, right? Who may have a license plate out as well, which gives probable cause for a traffic stop under Title 55. If we look out for the poor, if we look out for the African American and the immigrant, all of whom are abused most strongly by this scheme, then we white people, right, we Christian church-going white people who are the majority, we will get a benefit eventually. But we have to fight for it in terms of the biggest victims, in terms of the victims that have the most bloodshed, the most lost hours, the most poverty added to their ledgers first, right? We deal with in their interest first. It's not just self-interest, it's the interest of the weak. And that is my motivation with the Transportation Administrative Notice Project, in which I've given Chattanooga, and I gave Arnold Stoltz and Red Bank. I got around to Red Bank just this week, giving notice to Red Bank that it cannot enforce the transportation statute against anybody not involved in transportation, despite Supreme Court policy. And of course, I'll have to have a follow-up letter with the city commission there, and to Arnold Stoltz explaining the situation, because it does deserve an explanation in light of the high court having a policy in favor of total servitude of the people. In other words, the high court has not done its the right and just thing. It has imposed a lie, what's called a legal fiction, that all travel is transportation. We have to look out for the poor and the weak and the African American first, and then maybe we'll have some relief. David Toulis, what's on your mind?
Hey, that's all well and good, but is there not a responsibility in the black community to be responsible? Is there not a responsibility not to come here illegally and violate our laws just by being here? You're breaking the law. I mean, is it not only the responsibility of the police, but their responsibility? One step further, isn't it a responsibility to never, ever vote for a Democrat? Since, Democrats are racist, unborn baby killers, that it's in their platform and have kept blacks down for many years because, let's face it, without an entitlement society, they would go away because their whole platform is based on entitlements.
Well, I'd say that the black man, not having been given a good example in Christianity, has turned to socialism and Marxism as his theory, because those theories claim those theories claim to have an explanation for every part of life, and so does Christianity. But Christians in the Chattanooga area have rejected the gospel in many ways and think that it applies only to the individual and that there is no social policy in the Bible at all, whereas Marxism claims to have that.
Yeah, that's what's laughable about, Christians brought on gay marriage themselves by accepting the license of people who have a right under God to get married at common law. So the Christian community brought on they're responsible. It's not the left, it's not the Democrats, even though the Democrats are at fault for most things. It's the Christian community that accepts the police state and the licensing that allowed for, because it's under the Commerce Clause. If one state says I can license, the other states have to agree. It's a matter of Congress. New Jersey can't reject Tennessee's license, the driver's license, nor if New Jersey decides to license two males, can Tennessee, reject that. It's Congress. And it's the Christian community that allows that because they want just a little bit of socialism and a little bit of fascism. And boy, that camel's got his nose under the tent, doesn't he?
Well, that's right. And for the listener, Mike, I'll point out that the business section of the newspaper has every week or so business marriage licenses, and that's because marriage licenses are commercial, and the people involved in a licensed marriage under the state authority have not exercised a right, but they've obtained a privilege of marriage, which the enabling agent in that connection is the state itself. The man can't marry. Go ahead. The man can't marry, the woman can't marry. They don't have the capacity to marry on their own, and so they go to the state to allow them to marry, to unite in holy wedlock. And so what they've done is they've put the state at the center of their union, and so they're really stuck with a kind of state permission to marry. A serious problem. I would say that's a serious problem. And so they've not been Christian people who claim to love God and claim that God is their sovereign. They've not been careful about using the rights that he gave them and the responsibilities that he gave them. And so if we're going to have reform in Chattanooga, I would say that it needs to be on behalf of those parties most victim of the oppression. Now, we're hearing in the news the story about Officer Andrew Delkey killing Daniel Hambrick, and that occurred July 26th. And again, we have it's what's called a traffic stop. There's not detail given in the press report that I read in the Times Free Press this morning. But a traffic stop, again, is under Title 55. Was Daniel Hambrick involved in transportation? Was he a commercial user? Was the car in which he was found, was he using that car for hire? And I would say that the question of the jurisdiction of the statute, the charging statute in any traffic case, has to be brought up. Are you in the jurisdiction of Title 55? And how do you get there? Do you get there as Hector Olivencia said yesterday, the attorney? Do you get there because of how long you've been in the country or who you are? Or do you get there by being involved in a certain activity? And I would say, well, no, the statute makes it clear that you're brought under the authority of that law by the activity in which you're engaged. And so here we have this one more slain African-American, Daniel Hambrick, involved July 26th in a Title 55 traffic stop. The question that I'm trying to get you to think about, you, my listener, is the traffic stop itself. What is the authority for that? And is there not a mistake being made? Is there not an abuse permitted by the high court that violates the actual statute. And I think reform, if we want to have reform in Chattanooga, it has to be based on something. There has to be leverage. And I'm offering this notice, which is readily available online. You just have to Google or go to DuckDuckGo Transportation Administrative Notice. That's the keyword, and you'll find it on my website. You can also download it. It's a 20-page single-space legal document that I try to keep as short as possible. It's 20 pages long of legal analysis, restatement of the law. And these are grievous questions, and we're going to have police killings again through transportation, through traffic. We're going to have them in the future. Can we stop these kinds of encounters at the beginning? Do we just complain about it, or do we use notice, as I'm suggesting, using notice for your own personal benefit, and then long term for the benefit of Chattanooga? And the story in the paper indicated that the police officers found a gun. Now, I'm very skeptical about any report that police officers found a gun. Most cops, 80% of cops, have a throwaway pistol that they have secreted on their person during the day that they can plant on someone whom they've killed. Right? If they kill a kid if they kill some teenager, they'll have a toy pistol that they can plant on him so that they can justify the pulling of the trigger. Here, there's a camera running the whole time, so it may be hard to get away with. But the department in Nashville tweeted a photo of the gun later, July 26th, on the day he was shot down in the back, a bullet in the back in a transportation stop. What can cause that, especially in light of State versus Garner? No, it's Garner versus Tennessee. Garner versus Tennessee. And subsequent cases that softened the claims of that court ruling in the Garner case. You can't shoot someone in the back, especially someone who's a misdemeanor and who does not pose a threat to the life and limb of other people or the officer himself. You just can't do it. It's illegal. In fact, it's a murder. So police murders are common in America, right? We live in the United States, and police murders are accepted, and police get away with it. They get away with it even when juries get to hear the case, which is very rare. Juries rarely get to hear, the people rarely have a chance to weigh on whether such killings are lawful. But even then, juries let the officer go, effectively allowing execution. These are executions. Usually I'd say an execution is something that's done up close, but in the Delkey killing, it was some distance from the back, the man running away from him. There's absolutely no justification for that at all. And my question is, when will people in Chattanooga say, we have got to make fundamental change? And here I come, or here maybe you want to come, if you want to call me, to the city council. That's 800-8949, 800-8949. Is the city council in Chattanooga doing its job? Is it? We've had a police officer rape hidden in the files for some years, and an officer who is said to have done it again. There's been one story in the TFP about it. And in late June, early July, we had two women dragged from their cars, one in a transportation stop, that would be Diana Watt, in an outrageous, a simply outrageous encounter between piles of officers. Officers just pile onto this woman, and as her daughter, Shayla Johnson, makes the video. It's staggering and shocking, and the city council seems not to care. Even the African American members of the city council seem not to care, and they and their people are the biggest victims. How is it? What is it in the constitution of that body? What is it that once you get on that body, suddenly you become part of the establishment? Suddenly you become the one besieged by the faces of the public that look at you from the audience on city council night. How is it that suddenly you become the other side? You join the other side as a member of the city council. Is that what's supposed to happen? Well, I know it happens a lot. Okay, and Chuck Fleischman, for example, it happens to him. It happens to Senator Alexander, Senator Corker. They all eventually become the state. They become sort of the face of the state to us here. And we look at them and think that, well, they represent us to it. But no, they really represent it to us. They put the face on it, the welfare state, the surveillance state, the deep state. They are the face of the government, right? And they humanize the government. They make us feel that we are somehow connected to it. They personalize its wars. They personalize its programs and its announcements and its successes and its failures. But the city council of Chattanooga is sorely disappointing. And you, my listener, I want you to care about Chattanooga enough. I want you to love Chattanooga enough to let your city council member know that you are sorely displeased at the indifference to these killings like that of Daniel Hambrick, July 26th in Nashville. That is going to happen here. We have another dead black man just ahead. David Toulis, you watch.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Authorities are still looking for 71-year-old Tommy Shannon, who went missing from Ray County on Tuesday. His family says he's diabetic and may have Alzheimer's. He was last seen driving a maroon Ford Taurus with the tag number 260VQR. If you know where he is, call police. Georgia congressional Democratic candidate Stephen Foster was convicted of driving under the influence